Episode 1, The Alpha's Daughter. After the death of her father, Alpha Thorn, Seraphina Nightshade stood alone beneath the flames of his funeral pyre. She was his only child, his chosen heir. But the council chose someone else. They named her cousin, Darius, Alpha, not because he earned it, but because he was a man. The pack needs a strong hand, they said. Tradition mattered more than blood. Seraphina said nothing. She didn't fight the decision yet. But deep inside, she remembered everything her father had taught her in secret. Since she was 12, she had trained like a warrior, fought, bled, studied every law and battle tactic, knowing no one would give her power. She'd have to take it. At Darius's coronation feast, he toasted to himself and mocked her. He offered her a place beside him as a Luna advisor. You can help with herbs and gossip, he joked. The crowd laughed. Seraphina didn't. That night, alone in the dark, she wore her father's crest and looked up at the moon. She didn't see a future lost. She saw a promise. Without a word, she shifted. Her silver wolf form stepped into the night, silent, steady, powerful. They denied her the title, but Seraphina wasn't asking. She was coming for it. The days following Darius's ascension were filled with noise. Celebrations, patrol rotations, and council meetings. But beneath it all, the pack was restless. The forest had grown quiet in an unnatural way. Rogues had been spotted near the northern ridge, and whispers of dark movement in the east were carried on the wind. Seraphina noticed it. She always noticed what others chose to ignore. The new Alpha Darius dismissed the danger, calling the sightings wild stories meant to stir fear. But fear had a scent, and it clung to the trees. One morning, as Seraphina patrolled alone along the river bend, her wolf caught the unmistakable trace of another. Strong, familiar. Before she could react, he stepped from the underbrush, tall, broad-shouldered, amber-eyed. Ronan, the beta, the pack's fiercest warrior, and her fated mate. The bond hit her like a storm. Her heart faltered. Her wolf stirred restlessly beneath her skin, and for a moment everything else faded. But Ronan said nothing, no recognition, no awe, just a cold, assessing glance. So it's true, he said flatly. You're my mate. His tone held no warmth, no reverence, only disappointment. Seraphina stiffened. She had imagined this moment, often, foolishly. She'd imagined a partner who would stand beside her, not one who looked at her like a mistake. It doesn't change anything, she replied, masking the wound behind her voice. I didn't choose you either. Back at the pack house, the news spread quickly. The council was pleased. A beta and the daughter of the late Alpha. It sounded like balance. But Seraphina knew better. Ronan's pride wouldn't allow him to accept her as an equal. During a meeting with the patrol leads, Ronan cut her off repeatedly, challenging her every suggestion with smug indifference. We don't need strategy. We need teeth, he said, slamming a fist on the table. Seraphina didn't flinch. Then let's hope your teeth are sharper than your ears. That night, Seraphina returned to the woods. It was the only place she could breathe. There, she discovered the aftermath of a rogue ambush. A small scouting party of young wolves had been attacked. 2 were dead, another badly injured, barely breathing. She carried the survivor back herself, blood staining her clothes. Darius blamed the pups for straying too far. Ronan offered no thanks. No words, but the pack saw. They saw who bled with them, who acted. The next full moon during the hunting run, Seraphina found herself alone again with Ronan. The tension between them simmered, not just from the bond, but from everything left unsaid. He finally broke the silence. I don't want a mate who sees herself as an alpha. You can't have both. She turned, eyes glowing silver in the moonlight. And I don't want a mate who fears a woman in power. His gaze darkened, but he said nothing, because deep down he knew she was right. As the episode ends, Seraphina climbs to the top of the cliffs overlooking the valley, the wind whipping through her hair. She watches the forest below, not with longing, but with purpose. Her world may not accept her. Her mate may reject her, but she would lead, with or without their blessing. Episode 2, The challenge. Tension simmered beneath the surface of pack life. Serafina could feel it in every glance, every silence that followed her footsteps. Her presence made the council uneasy, and Darius increasingly saw her as a threat rather than a cousin. She wasn't just the alpha's daughter anymore. She was the only one doing what a real alpha should, protecting the pack. The rogue attacks weren't rumors anymore. They were coordinated. Serafina uncovered fresh kill sites in the southern woods, marked by blood and strange claw patterns that didn't match any wolf she'd seen. She brought the findings to the council, but they dismissed her once again. Darius waved a lazy hand and said, "You're paranoid. Rogues don't organize. You're just trying to prove something." Serafina gritted her teeth, barely containing the snarl curling in her throat. "I'm trying to protect this pack, which is more than I can say for its so-called alpha." The room fell silent. Ronan watched from the edge of the chamber, expression unreadable. He said nothing. Not when she spoke, not when Darius barked at her to leave. His silence cut deeper than Darius's arrogance. That night, as a storm brewed overhead, the rogues struck again, this time breaching the heart of the territory. A young she-wolf and her twin brothers went missing. Most of the pack scrambled to defend the northern borders, just as Serafina predicted. But the real attack came from the west. She disobeyed orders and went alone. Tracking the rogues through the mud and storm, she found the children caged in an abandoned human logging site, surrounded by at least 7 rogue wolves. They were larger than normal, twisted, with silver scars and sunken eyes. Experiments, maybe. Warped, trained. Serafina didn't hesitate. She attacked, not with brute force, but with precision. She drew the rogues away using scent trails, set traps with silver wire from nearby fencing, and used the storm's noise as cover. One by one, she took them down. Her body was bloodied, bitten, bruised. But when the pack finally arrived, they found the children safe and the rogues dead. Darius tried to spin the story, calling it a timely rescue thanks to his patrol routes. But the truth had already rooted itself in the pack's heart. Serafina had done what he couldn't. The next morning, she stood before the council and declared what none had dared before her. She challenged Darius for the alpha title. Gasps rippled through the chamber. The council was outraged. "A female has never challenged for alpha," spat one elder. "You defy every law of our kind." Serafina stood tall, her wounds still fresh, her voice clear. "Then the laws are broken, and I'm here to fix them." Darius laughed, mocking, cruel. "You want to fight, cousin? Fine. Let's show the pack what happens when a little girl pretends to be a wolf." The challenge was scheduled for the next full moon. 1 week. In the days that followed, whispers filled the pack. Some called her brave, others foolish. Ronan avoided her entirely. When she cornered him near the training pits, he finally spoke. "Don't do this, Serafina. You'll lose. And if you don't, they'll never follow you." She looked him in the eyes. "I'd rather fight for what's mine and die than bow for the rest of my life." When she walked away, Ronan didn't stop her. Episode 3, Outcast. The moon rose blood red the night of the challenge. The arena was carved into stone, surrounded by the pack. All eyes turned to Serafina as she stepped into the ring wearing her father's battle leathers. Darius stood opposite her, taller, bulkier, confident in his strength, and backed by centuries of tradition. But Serafina didn't flinch. She had trained for this moment in silence, in shadows. The only way out was through. The battle was brutal. Darius came at her like a hammer, all power and rage, expecting to crush her quickly. But Serafina was faster. She used his weight against him, dodging, striking, forcing him to exhaust himself. Her moves weren't showy, they were precise. She nearly had him down, until he broke the rules. In a moment of desperation, Darius shifted mid-fight, a forbidden act in a duel meant to be fought in human form. As a wolf, he lunged and slashed across her chest, leaving deep, burning claw marks. The crowd gasped. The council hesitated. Then, Instead of declaring her the winner by default due to Darius's dishonor, the council did the unthinkable. They turned on her. Seraphina Nightshade has defied our laws, challenged the rightful alpha, and disrupted the unity of the pack, the eldest council member announced coldly. For this, she is exiled. Bloodied and betrayed, Seraphina staggered to her feet, staring at them in disbelief. Even Ronan didn't speak. His fists clenched, his jaw locked, but he said nothing. Her fated mate let them cast her out. She left without a word. But the wild welcomed her. For days, she wandered through the outer territories, hostile lands full of rogues, ferals, and creatures even the council feared. She was hunted, wounded, and nearly killed, until she found them. Or rather, until they found her. A band of rogue wolves surrounded her one night, led by a scarred massive alpha named Kale. But instead of attacking, he knelt. "You wear the nightshade scent," he said. "You saved my brother's pups 2 moons ago during a rogue raid. We owe you a blood debt." Episode 4, The Rogue Alpha. The air in the rogue camp was different. Sharper. Tension hummed through the trees, but not from fear, from purpose. Seraphina had never seen wolves train like this. Feral precision combined with disciplined loyalty. Kale, the rogue alpha who had taken her in, was unlike any leader she'd known. He didn't bark orders or demand loyalty through dominance. He earned it through actions, quiet strength, and an iron resolve shaped by betrayal. At first, Seraphina kept her distance. She trained alongside Kale's wolves, taught them formal tactics while they taught her raw survival. She fought harder than anyone, earned their respect not through her name but her scars. Kale watched. Sometimes he trained with her, pushing her limits. He never treated her like a woman trying to prove herself. He treated her like a warrior. One night, as rain fell over the hills, Kale joined her by the fire. His voice was quiet, almost a growl. "You still look over your shoulder, even here." Seraphina didn't deny it. "You learn not to trust peace when the world only ever offers war." He nodded. "The council taught us both that." Their eyes met, something unspoken passing between them. Not the snap of a mate bond, something slower, deeper, built, not branded. But even in exile, the past didn't leave her alone. That night, a lone wolf broke into the camp, injured, half dead, bearing a message carved into his skin. A warning: she returns, she dies. Darius knew she was alive, and he was afraid. Kale revealed that this wasn't the first threat. His scouts had intercepted 3 other wolves in recent days, all carrying the same scent, Ronan's. Seraphina's chest tightened. She didn't want to believe it, but Kale's words were clear. "Your mate isn't just staying silent, he's hunting you." She left the fire that night with her heart tangled in thorns. Ronan had rejected the bond. Still, part of her had held on to a thread of hope. Now, even that was fraying. Kale followed her into the woods. He didn't speak, just stood beside her. The silence stretched. "I don't understand him," she whispered. Kale's voice was low. "Then stop trying to." When she turned to him, his expression had shifted. No longer just stern, but something gentler beneath the edges. "You don't need a mate who doubts your worth, Seraphina. You need someone who sees you. All of you." Something cracked open inside her. It wasn't sudden, like a bond. It was a slow-burning realization that the love she had been promised was not the love she needed. That night, for the first time in her life, Seraphina allowed herself to be held, not as an alpha, not as a warrior, but as a woman who had carried the world on her back for too long. Kale held her like she wasn't a burden. And somewhere in the dark, a seed of something dangerous bloomed. Episode 5, Blood Bond Broken. The rogue camp stirred before sunrise. Seraphina stood at the edge of the war table, eyes locked on the map of the valley. Kale circled behind her, silent but present, his aura steady like stone. Word had spread. Ronan was marching toward them with warriors from Silva Hollow, a pack known for dark dealings, blood magic, and brutality. The betrayal stung deeper than any wound. Her mate, the one fate had tied her soul to, had sold her out. But Seraphina wasn't the woman he left behind. She turned to Kale, fire in her voice. We don't run. We stand. We protect our own. Kale nodded. Then we show them what exiles are made of. The rogue army moved into position, fortified the cliffs and caves. Seraphina fought alongside them, not as their alpha, but as their equal. In the quiet moments between drills, her thoughts drifted to the bond. Even now, she could feel Ronan like a distant ache, still tethered, still alive in her blood. One night, she sat alone beneath the moon, hands trembling from the war building on the horizon. Kale found her there, watched her without speaking. I can still feel him, she admitted, even after everything. Kale stepped closer, then cut the cord. She looked up sharply. What? There's a way, he said. Blood magic, dangerous, painful, permanent. Her heart twisted. If I do this, I won't feel him at all. I'll be free. Kale's voice was calm, but there was an edge of worry. You'll also feel nothing for a while. Even love. Even me. Seraphina froze. This wasn't just about survival anymore. She had a choice. To cling to a toxic bond that tied her to betrayal, or sever it and risk losing what was quietly growing with Kale. She made her choice. That night, Seraphina performed the blood ritual alone. She lit the sacred herbs, sliced her palm, and spoke the ancient words from a time before the packs were united. Her body seized with pain. Visions flooded her mind. She saw Ronan's face twist with regret, saw a child crying, a future that would never come. The bond snapped like a branch, and for the first time in her life, she felt silence in her soul. Freedom. She collapsed in the snow, trembling. And Kale found her there, holding her until the shaking stopped. He didn't speak. He just held her like she was whole, even when she felt broken. The next day, Ronan arrived. He didn't come quietly. His soldiers from Silva Hollow spread like smoke through the forest, burning rogue outposts, poisoning water. But Kale was ready. He and Seraphina had set traps, rerouted paths, and readied the rogues for ambush. Seraphina stood face to face with Ronan in the center of a blackened glade. He looked thinner, harsher, something wild in his eyes. But the worst part? He looked hurt. You cut the bond, he growled. I did, she answered, calm. You were mine. She stepped forward, power radiating from every pore. I was never yours. You just had a claim. Kale has my choice. Ronan snarled, but he hesitated. Behind him, Silva Hollow wolves shifted nervously. They hadn't expected this, hadn't expected her to rise higher. Just as the battle was about to break, a Silva Hollow beta stepped forward, one with a twisted smile and familiar silver eyes. You thought this was about a mate? He said. We were promised more than her. Darius made a deal for the Nightshade line itself. Not just her, her blood, her womb. The forest went deathly still. Seraphina's stomach dropped. This wasn't just about exile. It wasn't even about revenge. It was about breeding a bloodline of power, with or without her consent. Kale moved in front of her, shielding her. They'll never touch you. Seraphina's eyes narrowed, her voice a whisper of wrath. No, they won't live long enough to try. Episode 6, War of the Wolves. Snow blanketed the valley as dawn broke, quiet and eerie, the stillness before a storm. Seraphina stood atop the ridge beside Kale, both clad in battle gear, eyes trained on the smoke rising in the distance. Silva Hollow's army was closing in, led by Ronan and the traitors who had sold her name and bloodline for power. The rogue wolves flanked the cliffs, hidden in trenches and treetops, every warrior trained under Kale and Seraphina herself. No more scavengers or strays. They were soldiers now, hers. The council may have cast her out, but she had built something stronger than they ever imagined. As the enemy approached, Ronan emerged from the trees, no longer noble or conflicted, just cold. Surrender, he called. No more blood needs to spill. Seraphina stepped forward. Then you should have stayed away, he snarled, and the valley erupted. The clash of wolves was a storm of fury. Claws, fangs, and war cries echoed through the trees. Seraphina led from the front, striking down Silva Hollow soldiers with grace and ferocity. She fought like she had nothing left to prove. Because she didn't. She had already won the one war that mattered, becoming who she truly was. Kale moved through the chaos like a shadow, taking down captains, protecting the flanks. At one point, he and Serafina met back to back in the center of the blood-soaked glade, covering each other without speaking. Their bond wasn't fate, it was earned in fire. Then it happened. One of Kale's closest men, Lazik, a stoic warrior who had once vowed to protect Serafina with his life, turned on her mid-fight. He lunged at her with silver blades meant for rogues, not enemies. She barely dodged the fatal blow. The betrayal sent a ripple of confusion through the rogue ranks. Kale tackled Lazik before he could strike again, pinning him to the ground. "Why?" he roared. Lazik bared his teeth, blood on his lips. "You changed. For her. You forgot what we are." Loyalty, it turned out, had fractured within Kale's own pack. Some of the old rogues never wanted to be part of a new order. They didn't want to be saved. They wanted chaos, not unity. And Serafina was a symbol of what they hated: a leader, a woman, and a future they didn't believe in. Kale didn't hesitate. With pain in his eyes, he ended Lazik's life then and there. The rebellion was crushed within minutes, but the damage was done. The cost of trust had been paid in blood. By nightfall, the enemy was routed. Ronan disappeared into the forest, wounded and alone. Silva Hollow's remaining wolves surrendered or fled. The valley was silent once more, but nothing felt the same. Kale sat beside Serafina by the river, both blood-stained and exhausted. "You were right," he said. "Some wolves can't be changed." She leaned against him, tired but unbroken. "Then we build with the ones who can." He brushed a strand of bloodied hair from her face, his voice low. "You're not just an alpha, you're a revolution." And she was. Not because of prophecy, not because of fate, but because she chose to rise when the world tried to bury her. Episode 7. The Crownless Queen. The wind carried the scent of home. After weeks of war and exile, Serafina stood at the border of Nightshade territory, staring across the river she once crossed in shame. Behind her, Kale and a small guard of rogues waited, silent but ready. She wore no crown, no formal title, only the battle-worn leathers of a warrior and the scars that marked her rise. Nightshade had changed. The trees seemed darker, the land colder. Under Darius's leadership, order had twisted into fear. Patrols marched with silver restraints, and whispers of punishments for dissent had begun to spread to the outer villages. Serafina stepped across the boundary and was met by gasps, not from rage, but disbelief. "She's alive." She came back. Guards drew their weapons, but hesitated. Her presence was no longer just defiance, it was legend. No one had truly expected her to return. Fewer still expected her to walk in without an army at her back. She requested one thing: an audience with the full council. It was granted, though barely. In the grand hall of the elders, where her father once stood, Serafina faced them once more, wiser, sharper, no longer begging to be seen. Darius sat in the Alpha's seat, arrogant as ever, flanked by two new advisors who reeked of Silva Hollow. "You've no claim here," Darius said coldly. "You abandoned your pack. You took up with traitors." She looked him dead in the eye. "I was cast out, and while you traded our land and honor for alliances with monsters, I built something stronger." Laughter echoed through the chamber, until Kale stepped inside. Rogue Alpha, feared by many, he walked without fear, without apology, and stood beside her. Serafina raised her voice. "I've come to make you an offer, not a plea." Gasps stirred. "Step down, disband the corrupted ties with Silva Hollow, restore the rightful traditions of our people, or I will do it for you, and I will not spare the ones who helped enslave this pack." The council refused. Of course they did. But murmurs spread across the room. The younger betas whispered her name. A few council members didn't meet her gaze. Even now, her presence was shifting something. As she left, tension still clinging to the walls, a Nightshade guard slipped her a note. One line: "They meet in secret under the crypt. They plan to strike before the moon turns." The true betrayal wasn't the alliance. It was a coming assassination, meant to kill the last of the true Nightshade bloodline before she could rise again. Seraphina didn't flinch. She rode to the crypt that night, alone, blades strapped to her thighs and fire in her eyes. What she found beneath the crypt was worse than conspiracy. She discovered the truth. One of the council elders, Alondra, the oldest among them, had once been in love with her father. When he chose Seraphina's mother instead, Alondra never forgave him. In secret, she poisoned the Alpha line, weakened their heirs, and planted Darius as her puppet to end the Nightshade reign from within. It wasn't just power, it was personal. And now Seraphina was the last piece to erase. But Alondra had made a fatal mistake. She'd taught Seraphina everything: how to listen, how to wait, how to think before striking. Episode 8, The Alpha's Challenge. The Nightshade training grounds hadn't seen a public challenge in over a decade, not since Seraphina's father defeated an opposing alpha under a blood moon. Now, they stood ready again, filled with wolves from every rank, summoned by a single call to witness what had once been unthinkable. Seraphina Nightshade had formally challenged Darius for the title of Alpha. She made her intentions clear: no war, no hidden assassins, just the ancient right, trial by strength, strategy, and spirit. The old ways, the true ways. The council tried to block it. Darius mocked it. But the wolves, especially the young, the outcasts, the ones inspired by her return, demanded the challenge be honored. So it was. The sun burned hot above the dueling circle, packed with wolves watching from the cliffs and edges of the arena. Darius stood in ceremonial black, surrounded by loyalists. Seraphina walked in alone, her hair braided back, wearing the colors of no pack, but carrying the weight of them all. Kale stood just beyond the boundary line, silent, tense. He had offered to fight in her place. She refused. "I don't need to be protected," she told him. "I need to be witnessed." The duel began. Darius struck first, swift and brutal, claws slashing. Seraphina dodged, countered with precision, using her speed, her agility, and the combat skills Kale had refined in her. She didn't overpower him. She outmaneuvered him. Again and again, she made him look slow, predictable, arrogant. Cheers began to rise for her. Still, Darius landed a crushing blow to her ribs that sent her sprawling. He stood over her, sneering. "You were never strong enough to lead. You were born with a crown, but no spine." She coughed blood, then smiled. "You always talk too much." She kicked his leg out, rolled, and pinned him with a blade to his throat before he could recover. Silence. Then, "Yield," she said, "or die." He didn't move, but his eyes, furious, prideful, finally lowered. "I yield," he spat. The crowd erupted. Seraphina stood slowly, every bone aching, but her stance was unshaken. Darius was escorted away. Some of his loyalists fled, others bowed. She had won. But not all victories come clean. As the crowd dispersed and night fell, Kale approached her. The pride in his eyes was clear, but there was hesitation underneath. She could feel it. "What is it?" she asked. He didn't speak at first. Then he reached into his coat and pulled out a sealed scroll. "This came while you fought, from the east." She broke the seal. Her face went still as she read. The Eastern Alliance, pacts that had stayed neutral through all this, offered Seraphina formal recognition as High Alpha on one condition: she must reject any mate without council blood. Kale wasn't of noble lineage. He was a rogue by birth, a rebel by choice, a shadow. To them, he was a threat to tradition. She folded the scroll slowly, locking eyes with him. "I didn't fight to wear their crown," she said. "I fought so I'd never have to bow again. Not to them. Not to fate. Not even to you." Kale gave a bitter smile. "So you're choosing your title?" "No," she whispered. "I'm choosing me, and I hope you still choose me too." He stared at her, then nodded once. "Always." But even as he said it, she felt the distance between them widen. She had won the right to lead, but whether she could keep love while holding power, that remained uncertain. Episode 9, Ashes of the Past. Smoke curled from the chimneys of the Nightshade stronghold as Seraphina stood on the Alpha's balcony, her balcony now. Below her, the pack trained harder, moved with sharper discipline, and no longer flinched when she passed. The air had changed. Respect was no longer grudging, but peace was thin as frost. Cale had been distant since the Eastern Scroll arrived. He remained by her side in public, but in private, he kept his thoughts guarded. She didn't press. She knew too well what it meant to battle ghosts, and he had more than his share. 3 days into her leadership, a stranger was captured at the border. An old man cloaked in black, with silver eyes and a mark on his palm, a faded Nightshade brand. The guards brought him to her, expecting him to beg for mercy. Instead, he bowed and whispered, "I knew your mother." That stopped everything. His name was Torin, once an exile for betraying Nightshade during a border skirmish years ago, or so the story went. But Torin told her another truth, one that no one had dared speak. "I was her guard," he said, "and her lover before your father claimed her. They feared her power, feared the blood that ran through her. So they burned the records and silenced anyone who knew her real origin." "What origin?" Seraphina asked. Torin leaned in. "Your mother wasn't born Nightshade. She was born to a bloodline older than this territory, one with a gift the Council tried to erase. You've inherited it, but it hasn't awakened." That night, Seraphina sat alone in the crypt where her mother was buried. She lit the pyre roots with her own hands, whispering her name into the smoke. And then the visions came. Flashes, fire, a woman cloaked in white surrounded by wolves of silver and flame, a prophecy buried in her mother's blood, and a warning. "You will have to give something up to rise." When she woke, her hands were scorched, but no one else had seen what she saw except Cale, standing in the doorway watching her with hollow eyes. "You went looking for truth," he said, "and now you're further from it." "I had to know who I am." "And what about us?" he asked. "Do you know what we are?" She moved toward him, her voice quiet. "We survived war, betrayal, the Council. I think we're more than just a story waiting to fall apart." But Cale didn't kiss her. He didn't touch her. He stepped back. "I can't stand in your light if it means fading into shadow." And he left. Episode 10. To Love an Alpha. The halls of Nightshade were colder now. Since Cale left, Seraphina had kept her focus sharp, restructuring the Council's and forging new alliances, training a generation that saw strength not as tradition but merit. Her name now stirred both reverence and fear beyond the Nightshade border. But every night, she looked at the place Cale used to stand beside her, and felt it like an open wound. Rumors came swiftly. Cale had returned to the Rogue Lands. Some said he was building a pack of his own. Others claimed he had vanished altogether. She silenced the gossip, but never stopped listening. Then came the message. A hawk arrived bearing a torn emblem and blood on the parchment. Cale had been captured. Not by Silva Hollow, not by the old Council remnants, but by a new enemy rising from the east. A war pack led by Alpha Brannick, who once served under Seraphina's grandfather and had been cast out for savagery. He now sought to reclaim the ancient ways by force, and viewed Seraphina's reign as heresy. Brannick sent no demands, only a warning. If the Alpha wants her rogue back, she must come alone. The Council urged against it. Her advisors pleaded, but Seraphina was already mounting her horse. "I won't be ruled by fear," she said, "and I won't abandon the one who never abandoned me." She rode east through the forested wilds until she reached the war camp, raw, vicious, lined with skulls and scars. Brannick stood waiting, a giant of a man with eyes like broken ice. "You come without your wolves," he mocked. "I don't need an army to speak for me," she answered. He laughed. "You're not here to speak, you're here to choose." He led her to the cliffside cage. Cale was inside, bruised, bound, and silent, but alive. Brannick offered her a choice. "Deny your title, renounce your seat. Name me rightful Alpha before your wolves. I'll let him live. Refuse, and I carve my name into your history with his blood." Serafina stared at Kale, and for a heartbeat, doubt flickered. Was this her cost? Was this what her mother had warned of? Kale's voice broke the silence. Don't you dare give them a single piece of what you bled for. Tears burned, but she didn't blink. She turned to Brannick, voice like steel. You think love makes me weak. He raised a blade to Kale's throat. She moved faster than anyone expected. By the time Brannick reacted, she had driven a dagger into his side, then whispered into his ear, Love doesn't make me weak. It makes me furious. Kale broke his own chains during the chaos. Together, they fought their way out, not just as mates, but as warriors who had always been better together than apart. The battle wasn't clean, and the price was high. Serafina walked away with blood on her hands and a broken arm, but she walked away with Kale. Episode 11. The Rise of Serafina Nightshade. The scars had not yet faded. Serafina stood before the ancient stone of the Alpha Circle, the sky above her draped in storm-gray clouds. Around her, packs had gathered. Not just Nightshade, but Silva Hollow, Eastern Crest, even some rogue clans. The Council, fractured and half-rebuilt, awaited her decision. This was the convergence. The war with Brannick's faction had shattered more than bones. It had stirred every ancient rivalry. All eyes now turned to Serafina, not for battle, but for the future. Would she take full control? Would she form a new central rule across the packs? Would she finally accept the title of High Alpha? And at what cost? In private, Kale stood beside her. He was quiet, thoughtful, but grounded. For once, there was no distance in his eyes. You said once you weren't born to rule quietly, he said. She nodded. I still believe it. Then speak loudly today. At dawn, she stepped into the circle. Every seat was filled. Every eye watched. The silence was heavy, expectant. She began not with demands, but with truth. I was cast out for being born a daughter. I was doubted for bleeding instead of howling. I was told to kneel, obey, surrender. But I didn't fight to wear your crown. I fought so no one else would have to burn just to be seen. A murmur spread. She raised the new crest, one forged from the ashes of her mother's secret bloodline and the silver of the rogue clans. A symbol of something never before allowed in wolfkind. Unity without dominance. Strength without bloodline. I won't rule as a queen of the old ways, she declared. I won't be the high alpha of a system that still chains half its own. If you want my leadership, it will be under new law, shared voice, equal right, and a council of mixed packs. If not, I'll return to the wild and build something better without you. They were stunned. But then, one by one, wolves stood. First, a Silva Hollow beta, then an Eastern scout, then an elder from Nightshade. And they bowed. Serafina didn't smile. She didn't cry. She simply breathed. For the first time, the air was hers. Later, at the riverside where she was once exiled, Kale found her alone. It's done, she said. It's beginning, he replied. She turned to him. I don't need a mate to make me whole. He nodded. I don't need a throne to stand beside you. Then he offered no vow, no mark, no ceremony, just his hand. And she took it. Her final words echoed as she took a step forward into the future. I was born to fight, but I rose to lead. The end. Please like, subscribe, and share if you love the story.